to press the record. Thanks, Kate. Gareth, should we make a start?
Yes, let's do that.
Thank you.
Hello and good evening, and my pharmacist colleagues from around the county. Thank you for tuning in. I'm hoping that pharmacists everywhere have now seen the community pharmacy, the consultation service pack, the resource pack, which arrived last week, and you'll be understanding that this evening is about this pack and how to use this toolkit to best effect. So I've got a short presentation here illustrating how pharmacists could introduce CPCS to your local GP practice. And the main bulk of the slides are from a patient and a team working perspective. And this slide deck will be available to pharmacists if they want to use it to support their discussions with the practice. But this evening, I've also woven into it some extra slides to share with pharmacists, community pharmacists. They're not in the DP slide deck. These few slides, I'll point them out as we arrive at them. They're from a pharmacy business perspective. So you'll understand why that is in a minute. So here's the top slide that you would use. Supporting referrals, referring from general practice to the community pharmacy consultation service.
This row.
Can everyone just mute themselves, please, if that's possible? Please press the mute button if you can at all, guys.
Put all those chairs in the decking, buddy. Oh. Around, Kerry. 17 of them. Oh.
So the first slide here that I would share with you, I've mentioned intro slide. This is that for pharmacy businesses. This is just to share a little bit of information on how pharmacies have been performing in Leicestershire and Rutland. And you can see since last summer, we've done a really good job. We're up to about 1,300 CPCS services, units of service every month. That's a considerable amount of money. It's about 18 or 19,000 pounds a month coming in, being shared across the contractor base in Leicestershire. Sticking with the pharmacy business perspective for a moment, CPCS is indeed very strategically important. I know we've all got views on it, and sometimes CPCS referrals come in when you're up to your eyes doing other things, and I understand that, but just bear with this. It is a strategically important service to a community pharmacy business. Commercially, if you can get through 3 CPCS units of service a day, that brings £840 per month into the business, and there isn't any new costs there. All the costs are already sunken costs, so that is a net contribution to your business. Strategically, of course, there is other good reasons to engage with the CPCS. We've heard last week there's this NHS recovery plan. There are 7 PGD conditions, and that's going to be sent in front of the pharmacy stage within 12 months. So that is how the future is shaping up. So operationally, if you think about a natural chronology here. We need to get surgeries compliant with CPCS services. That must happen before we really get to grips with the extended care PGD services. Extended PGD services that we have been doing in Leicestershire, you might not all be aware, but that's been a pilot study, and only in the Midlands region, and that pilot study has informed the government strategy, this NHS recovery plan, which is coming down the pipe. That's those 7 PGD conditions. So if we're able to operationally get CPCS right, then we can lead surgeries on and upwards towards extended care and the PGDs that we're doing in the pilot, and then we will be ready for that recovery plan. It is the future. It is what's going to happen. We don't have any options. That's what we have to get ready for. Just reflecting a little bit on the last 12 months of CPCS. CPCS has indeed been very hit or miss across the city and across the county. Only about a third of surgeries have been referring CPCS services into community pharmacies. Why? Why are surgeries so slow at referring patients in some places? Well, it might surprise you, or perhaps not surprise you, to know that the NHS give very little support surgery teams on what to do and how to make CPCS referrals. There's a list of allowable conditions, but as I mentioned, there's the extended care pilot in Leicestershire. CPCS and extended care have been really confused, and we've had inappropriate referrals into CPCS. You know the story. Patients get referred back. Practices are wondering what's going on. The referral process that practices have to comply with for CPCS has been very clunky. You'll all love it and be familiar with it. The PRISM forms, for example, emails coming into your inbox, and then you have to rekey it into your farm outcomes. The last bullet point here is a very clunky process for pharmacies to comply with. So it's poor communication with practices, difficult referral processes, and a real hassle for pharmacists to comply with it when the referrals come in. That's why it's been so hit or miss. So tonight I want to make the case for pharmacists to really take back the initiative here with CPCS. Taking it back, it's so important to not rest control, that's the wrong way, but it is a pharmacy service. But guess what, guys? It depends on surgeries making those referrals. So we need to encourage in such a way as to inspire and get the best out of surgeries to make more and more referrals. Pharmacy, as you know, with this report pack, this is how we're proposing to take the initiative, and you will be surprised that this initiative is being welcomed out there by surgeries. There's a couple of other things. I've mentioned them here as coincidences, if you like. So as well as this referral guidance, it does coincide with the launch of a thing called PharmRefer. We'll mention that a little bit later on. PharmRefer is a new, slicker referral process for surgeries to refer CPCS patients into pharmacies. This also, at this time, coincides with the pressure on GP appointments. It's very topical. It's all over the media. And of course, it coincides with this launch of the NHS Primary Care Recovery Plan. There is not a better time for community pharmacy to take back control of this service, which, as I say, it has not really been in pharmacy control. And tonight, I'm hoping to convince you to approach your surgeries and encourage them to get more involved. Okay, so You saw the slide to begin with. This is we're moving now into the slide deck that you might wish to use if you were to go and visit a GP surgery. You'll have to ask some of these questions by way of an introduction. What is the CPCS service, for example? You would flag that it has been established to better manage minor ailments. This is a very potted story here. It's taken referrals from NHS since October 2019. A key point to flag when you're speaking to receptionists and practice managers is that all qualifying CPCS conditions are treatable with over-the-counter medicines. Since that 2019 NHS 111 pilot, there have been general practice pilots, and from the 1st of November 2020, CPCS has become a national service. That's all you really need to say about the background to CPCS. Perhaps just worth running through the service outline in 5 simple bullet points. Bearing in mind you're going to be speaking to practice managers here, so you will remind the patient phones or presents at the surgery reception. Of course, they can imagine that in their mind's eye. Conditions are mentioned. Is that condition arising on the allowable list of CPCS conditions? The answer is yes. What options does the receptionist have? Well, option 1, we're familiar with. It might be 10 days or 20 days to the next available GP appointment, or the receptionist might add option 2 is a same-day referral with the pharmacist for a CPCS. So when you speak to receptionists and reception managers and practice managers, put it to them like that. We don't want patients to think that CPCS is just the surgery fobbing off the patient into the pharmacy when, of course, the patient went to the surgery to see a GP. So when you present this story, present these options this way around, remind them the patient might have to wait 10 or 20 days for a GP appointment, or you can imagine it at the point of care saying to the patient, well, I can refer you to the pharmacy today. The pharmacy, the surgery has to send an electronic referral, and the pharmacy will make contact with the patient within 4 hours. All sounds wonderfully quick. And then the pharmacist and the patient will have a consultation. And when you save it, there will be an electronic reply to the record. That's the service outline. That's as much as you really need to say. The conditions to be referred, well, there's quite a long list of them here. This is in some of the paperwork that practices have received, quite a shed load. But what we have put in the pack is this referral guidance. It's a much easier to use tool. As you can see, it lists the conditions down the left-hand side, the general areas. In the green section, these are the symptoms that would be suitable for referring into community pharmacy. And on the right-hand side, alongside those conditions, there are some symptoms coded as red here. And these are symptoms that should not be referred to pharmacy. And let me just illustrate that. So here's a slide that very nicely illustrates. Please walk through this with receptionists. So at CPCS, this tool is a signposting or streaming tool for non-clinicians. Don't use the term triage. Receptionists are not triaging anything here. It's signposting or a streaming tool. That word streaming comes from some of the information that did go to practices about CPCS. Remind them that they refer green conditions or symptoms into CPCS, but again, more importantly, perhaps, don't refer those patients if any red conditions are noticed or mentioned. That's corresponding red conditions. Always remind them to look at the red side of the table to minimize referral back to the surgery. and we'll illustrate it here with the top one on the list, bites and stings. So as I'm saying here, the patient would describe perhaps a recent wasp sting incident. The arm is swollen up, you get the picture. This corresponds with a green symptom from that receptionist guidance tool. So good, so far so good. It looks like we're heading towards a CPCS candidate. Patient then mentions feelings of chest palpitations. This could be a red symptom. As you can see, mentions fast heart rate here on the right-hand side. And if that were to arise as a scenario, then that patient would be referred to the GP, not to the pharmacy, even though there's swelling going on. If the heart rate, if the palpitations, that overrides the green symptoms, those situations do not get referred into CPCS. Also, just to assure receptionists, tell them that the pharmacist will refer back patients if they identify any red flag issues. So if any of these things happen to be missed, you guys will hopefully pick up those symptoms and refer those patients as appropriate because of the red flag considerations. And let's just reflect on this for a moment, because this is indeed important. We tell practice managers, receptionist managers, GPs if they're attending a discussion with you, that the CPCS consultation protocol is designed to identify red flags. And of course, we're obliged by the protocol to refer those patients back to the surgery where a red flag is identified. But it's important to say that occasionally referral back should reassure the receptionists and the practice managers, because it demonstrates clinical vigilance. The clinical intervention happens in the pharmacy. The referral to the pharmacy is not a clinical intervention. It's signposting or streaming, as we've mentioned earlier. So tell the receptionist, mention to patients that if they do end up being referred back to the surgery, that these are good indicators of clinical team working. And if that does happen, you would be fast-tracked for a GP appointment, much quicker than that, 10 or 20 days. But it would be good for patients in the long run. You might want us to illustrate for receptionists exactly what the protocol might involve. So there's advice only, for example. It mentioned sleeping difficulties. It's an advice-only intervention. Here's one, adult headaches. Advice supply of over-the-counter medicines. They will be able to understand that. Here's an 18-month child with conjunctivitis. Again, you might have to refer that one to a pharmacy that does extended care with the chloramphenicol if you're not extended care accredited. And then looking beyond that, here we have a patient with lower back pain. The pharmacist might give advice and signpost into a physiotherapy service, for example. So those are a few illustrations. That's the one at the end here. I don't know if you can see with the various screens coming up. Here's an example of a patient who has a headache, reasonable for that to be referred in by a receptionist, but on consultation, you realize that it could possibly be concussion given the activities that patient was doing. So that's enough to illustrate to the reception team what you might be saying and doing and what outcomes and eventualities might arise. So cracking on, we mentioned earlier the CPCS referrals from general practice must be electronic. I mentioned one of the coincidences, and here it is again. The practices will have the option of referring patients via PharmRefer, which is an integrated application. It looks like Pinnacle. It's got the same color coding, that orange and blue. The referral is auto-populated with all the patient details. They don't have to create a PRISM form. receptionist just has to has to tick the appropriate condition box and hit send, and off it goes to the pharmacy. In the pharmacy, the surgery referral comes into Pharm Outcomes, just like referrals from NHS 111. That's going to save you guys a lot of time. And another little point here that surgeries might like, the application license cost for Pharm Refer, it's free. It's free to the surgeries from April 2023. I'm just going to show you here, I hope this works, a little bit of a clip from a Pharm Refer video. Just let's see if this works. If not, I'll skip it. Media could not be loaded, so okay, I didn't think it would work from a shared screen perspective. So let's just skip back out of that.
If you open it in a different screen, Gareth, it might work in a different tab. I'm not sure if you, and then share it that way if you want to.
Let's see if I would have to stop screen sharing, wouldn't I, to do that? Bear with me, guys. Okay, I'm try that again now. Can you hear that, guys?
No, Gareth.
Sorry, Gareth. Gareth, you might have to share, you know, on your Zoom, you might have to share sound on your settings.
Okay. Tell you what, it's on the website. I think we can. Can you see that screenshot just there at the moment, by the way?
Yeah, we can see the screenshot. You can't hear it.
Right. Okay. Let's skip it. It's not crucial because this is what's happening in front of the receptionist. It's simply it's an illustration here of how of what the receptionist sees, and essentially it's a very slick. I don't know if you've where you've done flu vaccinations and COVID vaccinations. It's made by the same people, Pinnacle, and it's as easy to use as the COVID and the flu vaccination input. So let me stop that share again and do it again. Can everyone see that that slide now? CPCS referrals must be electronic. Can everyone see that, please?
Yeah, we can see that, Gareth. That's fine. We can see that.
Okay. Apologies about that little diversion. The Pharm Refer video, as I said, is on the LPC website. It's about 3 minutes and well worth a watch before you start describing it to receptionists. I've mentioned PRISM templates. That's the very clunky process that you've all come to know and love. It's not recommended anymore. So don't be pushing it. The Pharm Refer, as I mentioned, there's an email in Practice Manager's inbox from April, I think it was, in the last few weeks, So if you refer them back to their inbox, if they haven't seen it, they should be able to find it. Just tell them to search their inbox under Farm Refer, and they should be able to find it. Okay, so moving on. Outcomes, they'll be surprised to hear what the outcomes usually are. Advice only is a third of the patients get advice only, and that satisfactorily resolves the issue. About 25% of patients are given advice and simple sale of an OTC medicine to mitigate symptoms. There's other types of outcome that patients do get escalated about. It's about 12 to 15%, and that tells you that about 85% of patients referred are dealt with by the pharmacy or referred elsewhere. Essentially, 85% of those patients are resolved outside of the surgery. That is good. That's a good statistic, and that they will be really interested in that. So, next step for reception teams, you've introduced it. What do they do next? Well, you would want them to have a team huddle at reception and to discuss that referral guide for receptionists. I mentioned the bee stings example. You would want that reception manager or the practice manager to go back and have that conversation with the receptionist team. Also, you're going to give them some of the resources out of this this pack. Use the FAQs. That's a really helpful document that's in there. It's quite a colorful document. You can see it. I'm sure you've already seen it in the pack. And the reason why that's in there and why it's presented like that is to provide you with a discussion option. Pharmacists don't want to go and necessarily do presentations. It's difficult to find time to do presentations. When you mention presentations, there's all sorts of assumptions about the kit that you need and et cetera. It's just not always, you don't always get the opportunity to do a presentation. But if you do have a conversation for a quick chat, a quick discussion, and you use this as a support, if you just pick out the questions arising in the FAQs, if you get through half a dozen or 10 of them, you will have covered the key points that the reception team will need to appreciate and understand in order to get to grips with CPCS. So essentially, you will have covered the material that would be in a presentation within these FAQs. A really easy thing to do. And what I would suggest you do when it comes to that, we all would assume that when we talk about presenting this to receptionists or practice managers or whatever, that involves you going to the surgery. Well, park that thought for a second. Why don't you suggest that the assistant practice manager pops down to the pharmacy, the receptionist manager pops down to the pharmacy. They're not clinicians. They can up sticks and come down at some time in the afternoon, invite them into the dispensary, run through the presentation. If you've got a laptop, if you've got a terminal, just click into the LPC website and be able to run through this stuff. But the key point there between the lines is to get these people to come and visit you. If you're not able to get to them, do invite them down, make them a cup of tea and say, right, let's run through this pack together. Let's see what we can do to start referrals. Key point here, point 3, is to confirm the local referral back process. That's detailed in the pack. You will need to have a confidential email address for the practice, so that if you do need to refer back for a routine appointment, then you use that. Sometimes that's built into the farm outcomes. And then, of course, ask for the backdoor telephone number. If you do need to refer someone back urgently, that would be a number that circumvents reception straight to someone who can take that urgent call and take the details of that patient that needs fast-tracked back. You would refer them straight from the pharmacy back to the surgery. And ideally, point 4, instead of sort of leaving this at 50,000 feet, ask for a named individual. Let me wet my whistle here. ask for a name, someone at the surgery who will be the point of contact for implementing CPCS, someone that you would come back to as issues might arise, because there will be teething issues. Let's move on. So I've already covered this to some extent. As I say here, no particular order is necessary for this FAQ, and what it does is it helps to understand each other's position and role within the service. Just going to find my place here again. There's a few more resources in there which you might have noticed in the pack. This one, it describes the patient journey. Remember, this is a referral process. If you or I were referring, certainly I personally, if I was referring a patient into another service, it's useful to have an understanding and appreciation in your own mind's eye what the patient pathway is going to be involving. And there's half a dozen or 10 points. It describes the patient journey. So if the receptionist understands the patient journey, then they're going to be more comfortable, let's say, more comfortable referring patients into the CPCS patient journey if they can understand it front to back. So at that point, you might have the feeling that you've convinced the practice, perhaps a practice that's not done any CPCS referrals. They like what they hear, understand the benefits. Now they're going to do what they can to implement it. So this last piece of written resource, getting ready to make CPCS referrals. That reception team manager, they would love this piece because it just describes the key things that they simply need to put in place to make CPCS happen. And it includes things like sending out a test referral. It suggests phoning pharmacists and saying, not just to your pharmacy, but the other pharmacies in the locality, you know, a week on Monday, we're going to start CPCS referrals. Please anticipate a test referral, etc., etc. So that you're working on this together. You will also notice in the pack, there are some colourful poster resources. I mentioned earlier, patients some might push back and say they're being fobbed off with a referral to the pharmacy. Not many patients have heard about the CPCS service, and even fewer will have experienced it. What this here is designed to do, you've got two posters that look like this, one for each end of the patient journey. One copy of the poster to be in the surgery consultation room and the other to be in your pharmacy, displayed where the patient can see it. So what that will do, it will subliminally assure patients that what's going on is a joined up service. They're saying your local healthcare team getting better together, those sort of signals in the surgery and in the pharmacy. It really reassures patients that the referral is an integral, proper part of the NHS suite of services. I'm going the wrong way here. Alongside that poster that I've just mentioned is an illustration of CPCS in action. So this poster illustrates someone with a skin rash, and that shows a very good example that the patient will understand and appreciate, showing how your surgery and your pharmacy can work together as a team. And the few words it simply says, next time you contact your GP surgery, you may be offered a same-day appointment at a community pharmacy of your choice. So the previous poster was the spirit of team working, and here's an actual illustration of that in practice. And finally, an interesting concept, nicked this idea from NHS Somerset. This poster is designed to be in surgery staff rooms. So if you speak to this practice manager, ask them to put this particular one up in the surgery staff room. The idea here is to keep CPCS topical for as long as you possibly can. Think pharmacy, think CPCS. That's the catchphrase, if you like. And if staff in the surgery are having their coffee break or whatever it might be, the lunch break, perhaps it might just prompt conversations around CPCS and how they can free up GP appointments using it. Moving on, I did mention extended care. I think it would be difficult to get in and out of the surgery without addressing this. The consideration here is to get a mention in of extended care without confusing it with CPCS. That's the important thing. To give a heads up with it, but not to confuse. So we've got some useful bullet points here just to present that and to keep it as simple as possible. They might ask then, what about UTI referrals? What about extended care, etc.? Explain that extended care is an enhanced service. Mention that it is quite separate from CPCS and use this play on words. It's an extension of it. Use that, it seems to work. You can mention very clearly that while CPCS is a national service proposition, the extended care proposition has been a Midlands pilot study. You might also say that it's for common conditions, a bit like CPCS, but for common conditions. But in this case, that may require a prescription-only medicine to respond to those particular symptoms. They may understand, the receptionists may appreciate patient group directions, and just say that it's quite a different kettle of fish, if you like. It requires pharmacists to complete considerable extra study with the attendant accreditations. Just hold your hand up and say not all pharmacies are accredited, and it would be wise for the surgery team to discuss with their local pharmacy if they are indeed accredited to do any of the extended care suite of services. But if not, just stick with the CPCS services in that referral, red and green referral document. There are no extended care conditions in that red and green referral document. That's an important thing to point out. So I hope everyone's quite clear on that. CPCS, what they all have in common is they're all treatable with OTC medicines. Extended care, what they all have in common is that they all need prescription medicines, or likely to use prescription medicines, and therefore require PGDs and extra study. And most practice staff will understand that, the difference between OTC treatment and prescription treatment. Get it gone into other characteristics of the two services. That's sufficient, and it's usually enough to get the message across. You could mention Tier 1, Tier 2. I haven't gone any further than that. Tier 1, simple UTI and acute bacterial conjunctivitis. I wouldn't go any further because the presentation is primarily about CPCS, but it points to a direction of travel. What the LPC has also prepared, if your practice does want to refer UTI and you are extended care Tier 1 accredited, we've created this. You can see it's red and green. It's for simple urinary tract infections. You might notice that any UTI infections that you've received, the word simple seems to disappear from the vocabulary. Receptionists just refer anything that smacks remotely of being a UTI. And of course, you know, and I know there are quite a number of red flags associated. Absolutely zero guidance has been given to practices with respect to referring UTI patients into pharmacy for the extended care service. Absolutely nothing, which is why difficult situations arise. So this resource, if you want it, come back to me afterwards, I can share it. It's for support practices where you are up to speed with your PGD for nitrofurantoin. It's a really, really helpful resource. So let's wrap things up here. We're on to the summary. Tell surgeries that CPCS is all about services for conditions that are treatable with over-the-counter medicines. Keep hammering that. They should always refer to the receptionist guidelines for referral decision support. Remind them to look at that red side of the table, not just the green side, because that seems to be arising. If it's on the green, get it sent. They must just put the brakes on for a moment and check the red side of the decision support tool. You tell them that you can only deal with patients that have been electronically referred to you, that the service cannot be provided to patients who just stroll up to the chemist counter. Just say it directly, because if you start dealing with patients who just stroll up because they've been sent across from the surgery, then they will latch onto that and you'll have a real headache. So if this is your opportunity to introduce CPCS to a surgery who's getting to grips with it for the first time, please do tell them they must, on every occasion, electronically refer patients. Just on that extended care front again, clarify the distinction, the prescription-only medicines involved. More pharmacists are getting accredited. They should check locally before they venture into extended care services. And if they were to refer an extended care patient, they still have to go back to NHS mail in that PRISM form. I don't think the form refer will allow them to send a UTI patient through. Finally, some of you will have had issues, let's put it like that, arising in the past where you've, in good faith, tried to support practices. Think about when you tried to support practices with their flu vaccination services and indeed COVID vaccinations, and the difficulty, the strain that put on relations because you were seen as the competition. Why is it different with CPCS? Let me reflect on that with you. CPCS supports practice businesses with their core contract services, their GMS contract that they get their capitation income from. So it's non-competitive. Pharmacy and CPCS is a non-competitive supporting role. And that contrasts with situations where you venture into enhanced services territory, flu vaccinations and the COVID vaccinations, and then all the angst that causes. So CPCS core contract, there's no pushback. You're helping them to do what they should be doing anyway. Their appointments are under pressure. The money that you get isn't coming out of the GMS contract, it's coming from a different source, and you're not heading on their toes as far as enhanced services is concerned. So what is there not to love about CPCS at practice level? But importantly, and finally, my last line, this CPCS service and this opportunity presented to practices is a really, really good opportunity to build professional relationships that will tee you up for the future that we're seeing already and building on the horizon with these 7 BGT services that's going to be coming at the end of the year. Guys, that's the end of my short story. If there's any other questions that you want to raise with me, questions just now. That was supposed to be 30 minutes. I think it was a bit more than 30 minutes. Rashmi, can I hand back to you if you want to?
Yeah, thanks, Gareth. No, that's fantastic. Thank you, Gareth, and thank you for everyone for joining. We've got some time, so I know the webinar was only for 30 minutes, but just thinking whilst we're together and what we can maximise this opportunity, if you have any questions specifically on CPCS or extended care, feel free to ask. if you want to, you can pop it in the chat, raise your hand, and if not, and you understandably need to get away, then feel free that you can get away. I'd certainly like to say thank you, Gareth, because I thought that was really comprehensive, just to walk us through the toolkit, and I hope everyone's found it really useful just to understand how the toolkit is to be used, and what kind of conversations probably need to take place with practices. The only thing I would like to highlight is and reinforce is just around making sure that you coordinate that activity with your practice or practices at a local level. So rather than every pharmacy within each PCN targeting the same surgery, it's really important that as a PCN or as a locality that you work together and maybe start to divvy up which practices you'll target, so it's an even playing field for everybody. And I think, you know, that would certainly be most welcome from practices as well, rather than being bombarded by 6 different pharmacies to coordinate and maybe just do one visit. But obviously highlight that the fact that there are a number of pharmacies, and it's really about patient choice when it comes to selecting the preferred pharmacy for the referral. So I'm just going to check the chat. I can't see any questions coming through. But feel free that you can put yourself on unmute, or you can
just as you're doing that, Rashri, I should have stressed the LPC website, the CPCS section on the LPC website. If you were to go onto the LPC website, it's set up to open at the CPCS page. There's 3 or 4 pages within that: resources for pharmacies, resources for surgeries, team working, and some videos on there. Look inside the resources for surgeries and you'll find a useful introduction there. There's a PSNC video introducing CPCS to surgeries, just conceptually. And then there's the Pharm Refer training video in there under resources for surgeries. Have a little look at that before you pop around. All of that did not need to be in the pack. It's there for you to have a look at, and just keep it as focused as you can with those resources that are in the pack when you meet the staff. But do invite them around to your pharmacy.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Well, thank you, everyone. I can't see any questions in the chat. Obviously, if you want to, feel free that you can use the chat. Me and Gareth will stay and make sure, but just want to say a sincere thank you for taking the time out of your evenings to join us this evening. Hopefully you found it useful and you continue to find the resources on the website that Gareth just referred to, as well as the toolkit, useful. And if you have any individual questions and you want to contact myself or Gareth, please feel free. Thank you, Gareth, for a great presentation and walking us through the toolkit as well. That was fantastic. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you. Good night. Are we still recording?
Kate, can you finish? Can you